E hi aki ana te atakura, he hio, he huka, he hohu, ti hei mauri ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. First of all, we're all here, so no apologies. I haven't received any identification of any extraordinary business that isn't already on the agenda. David, have you been made aware of anything? No?
One late report, Mr. Mayor, in public excluded.
Great. And it's been pre-circulated to councillors. Any conflicts of interest that people would like to raise that sit outside everything that's been disclosed already? No. There's no public forum today. But before we move to the confirmation of minutes from the last meeting, I'd just like to thank everyone for their involvement in the whakatau whare this morning, the blessing and settling of the land and buildings around Te Ara-Atia. It's been a long journey for many on this council and for many in our community around seeing a facility like that go up and to be now less than a week away from its official opening, which will be Wednesday next week, is really exciting. The building is a piece of artwork in itself, and it's housing many other pretty cool and historical taonga to Selwyn. And the two items I think of particular interest and meaning for Taumutu, one is the greenstone pendant that is there now, dated sometime between 1500 and 1800, found on Kaiteriti Spit, which is housed in Te Ara-Atia, and it's the first time it's been released from Canterbury Museum since it was found. And the second item will replace that in a few months' time. And so Taumutu is hopeful that we might end up in a space that a piece of particular significance will always be housed here in Te Ara-Atia. So I just want to acknowledge the staff and councillors who have been on this long journey, and Kelvin's in the room, Kelvin, previous councils that have been involved in that decision as well. We have confirmation of minutes from our last meeting. Thank you, Mark. Seconder of those. Bob, and discussion, Grant?
Just a small amendment. I was present on an apology as well as present. So I was there. I think it's Councillor Lemon rather than Miller that should be the apology.
Great, we can make that change. Any other changes or comments? Grant, did you have something else? No, Shane?
Kia ora, Sam. Yeah, I was an apology, but just like to thank Grant Miller for speaking on behalf regarding transport and rail. Thank you.
Great. All those in favour that they be recorded as true and accurate, please say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Matters under investigation. There's 3 matters there: community centres, halls and libraries. Due back 2022, accessibility report, same date, and Canterbury Museum representative update in first quarter 2022. The first item with the report is the Sister City annual report. It's great to have Alison and Kelvin. Alison Rosnowski is known to everyone in the room, and Kelvin too. So if you'd like to come to the front, thank you for sending the report through. Sister City relationships look a little bit different in COVID times around the world with much less travel and face-to-face communication, but it's great to know that the relationships are continuing to be blown along. So thank you, Alison and Kelvin. I'll hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Sam. Tēnā koutou katoa. Konnichiwa from Japan. Ni min hao from China. Selamat sore from Indonesia. Good afternoon from Coventry. Kelvin, Mayor and councillors, and they were greetings from our sister city languages. As Sam has alluded, and you have our reports in your minutes, in your files, no doubt, it has been a COVID disrupted year again for us, but social media means that we have had frequent interaction with our sister cities, and the sister city relationships are in good heart. We have new mayors in Akatakata and Ubets, Mr. Ishimura in Akatakata in Japan, and many of us know Tomo, who's the new mayor of Ubets, who has stayed in many homes in Selwyn, and many Selwyn people, including Sam, have stayed in his home. So it's fantastic to see someone with his international focus as the new mayor of Ubetsu. The Student Partnership Program, Darfield High School has initiated with Ubets. So because normally there are interchanges every year, they're having Zoom interchanges and sharing language culture on Zoom meetings between students and both talking in the other's language, which is fantastic for those students. We're exploring these, doing similar things, except of course the language will have to be English for Turaja, with the junior high school teachers who worked with our teachers there last year, with Coventry in Rhode Island, and with Shandon Bailey. And in the case of Shandon Bailey, the Darfield High School Rural College practical program is one that we're working on at the moment, that they can share some of the things they're doing outside the classroom with the vocational college in Shandon Bailey. Just a comment on the 2020 Cultural Fest, a fantastic event, and the council staff who organised that are to be congratulated on what they do. Unfortunately, of course, this year's one didn't happen. Our biggest success this year, of course, and sitting in front of Kelvin, the New Zealand Sister City Conference, and Kelvin will report on that shortly. But we did win, and thanks to Kelvin and Bernadette for preparing the applications, along with Bob, the best council program for the whole of New Zealand for our relationships with Turaja. That's both the incoming group and our teachers going there. So we were very proud to receive that. And then Kelvin, who was representing us there, was astonished, I think, to discover that we actually won the best overall project for the whole of New Zealand that year. So we won the national award. So those are those two trophies sitting there. Kelvin, along with Graham Robinson, was invited to speak about the Turaja relationship because it's an unusual one. It started with the economics relationship and then moved to the sister city relationship. And Kelvin's going to briefly talk about that conference.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. I was pleased to go up there, and I was further incentivised by the fact that they paid my airfares up there as well, which was to get me up there to speak, and Graham Robinson was the same. And it was also good that I was able to stay with some friends up there, so it was a pretty cheap trip up there, so that was good. But the Sister City Conference was attended by delegates from Sister City committees, councillors, and there was mayors there from Lower Hutt and Wellington as well. And so there was a big range of people there and a big range of projects and activities that they were doing. But the big group, they also had quite a debate about the name of the organisation, and they've changed it to Global Cities. I didn't think that was particularly smart because I thought it took the emphasis away from the sister side and put the emphasis on the city side. And for Auckland and Christchurch and Wellington, that might work, the big cities, global cities, but it certainly didn't represent all the smaller groupings around the country that were doing it. So, however, that's what they've done. So we live with that. The projects that the Turaja project that we were involved in, I mean, it was a real team effort. And when you think back over what's happened, originally there was the farmers group. But since Alison's taken over with the Sister Cities one here as well, and thanks to Alison too for preparing the application, I think that was a really impressive effort there. But if you think about it, there was the delegation that came here, so we had a bunch of their officials came over here and they met with council staff and activities, and so there was a whole team effort here with the council involvement in there, as well as the teachers going over to Turaja. And while it was about 25, was it? Teachers?
80 applied for the places on the course. They could only take 25.
25. And so if you think of the influence of that, those 25 teachers, hopefully, have learned a few more tricks of the trade of teaching English, particularly as a foreign language, and they'll be going back to their classes of probably 30 kids in every class. Their classes are pretty big over there. So you're having an outreach of something like 750 pupils plus the teachers. So there's a lot of people were involved in this, will be affected by it. So it was a really great project. And yes, I was delighted that we won the best local government project. That was amazing. But the real surprise when we won the overall one as well. That was a fantastic night. So I actually stayed on for the conference dinner where the awards were made, and so that was a really great night as well. So it was a very, I thoroughly enjoyed it up there. Thank you for the opportunities to be there and represent you all. And long may it continue, involvement in the sister city.
And of course, the sadness is that we were due to have more teachers go to Taraja and bring some of their teachers here. 3 of the Rolleston schools were happy to host teachers here, but COVID has just got in the way of all of that. So it will happen. We've just got to be patient. Just to report to you that Kelvin has resigned as Deputy Chairperson of the Sister City Committee, but he's staying on as a valuable Sister City Committee member. We won't let him go. And our Deputy Chairs are Bob, who is continuing, and Jenny. And it's great to have the two councillors as the 2 deputy chairs of the Sister City Committee, and we thank them for their valuable service to this mahi. The Christchurch China Committee, on which we're represented in our relationships with Guangzhou and their relationship with Wuhan because of Riwi Alley, has been really busy, and we've had a lot of meetings and Zoom calls through to Wuhan and to Guangzhou. In fact, we have another one on Friday. There. The joint website that we're developing with Christchurch City Council, which they are paying for, with Selwyn and Huranui, based on the Riwi Alley connection, is progressing. Perhaps not quite as quickly as I'd hope, but it's progressing, and we will get there. We do have a need to update our Selwyn City Sister City webpage on the council website, and we need your help with that. It's not that we haven't got the material, it's about the technology and technical support that's required. So, although there have been no in-person visits, Sister City relationships are in good heart, and we look forward to the next year and maybe the year after when we actually can meet people in person again. If there are any questions, we're happy to take them.
Good, thank you very much for that report. I guess one of the things that is consideration is how 2022-23 looks and how, what we've learned through this time about what relationships are. Have you had any thoughts around how we don't just go back to 2019 and, just instigate the things that we know, but how 22-23 might look slightly different than where we've been with the things that we've learned? Or Calvin, were there some things that you picked up from others at the conference around what they've done in the last 12 months?
The only comment I think I'd make, Mayor, was that we're all getting used to these Zoom meetings, and you've heard Darfield has picked up that technology, and it's something we've been trying to do with the Taraja group too, is to try and get the school kids involved in Zoom meetings or Zoom talking with the classes here as well. And I suspect that the fact that we're all a bit more familiar with Zoom might make it a little easier to get those sort of relationships going as a prelude to even visits or further, student exchanges and things like that. So I think that's probably the direction for the immediate future until we can get back to the travelling again.
Shane.
Tēnā rā tātou, Alison, Kelvin, thank you very much and congratulations on winning your awards. On page 23, you'll be displaying digital boards within the new Te Ara Aotea. Currently, do you display the Sister City message throughout any of the other libraries throughout, say, Leaston? And I've had a recent walk through the gardens at Horswell Junction. There's a section there that's dedicated to Riwi Alley. Do you think there's opportunity into the future to put something similar in, say, the new reserve in Prebbleton?
When we made a request of the council, we were told for Sister City Garden that Levi Park was the place that we could go. So I guess it's one step at a time, and we're sort of waiting for the update from the Parks Department on that. And your second point was, sorry?
further spaced throughout the network.
Oh,
Yeah, we've talked with Stephen with Stephen Hill, and it was his idea that we would be part of those digital displays. And you'll be aware that just outside here, the banners that we use for Cultural Fest, and they are being circulated around the libraries and the council, so they do go to different places. And it's quite interesting sometimes the feedback we receive of people who've seen them and said, oh, I didn't know. So they do work. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much.
and there is also, we have an interest, if you like, in the one in the garden, Chinese garden in the Horswell Quarry Park.
Yes, yes.
That has been initiated by the Christchurch Sister City one, but we've been involved in that and we've taken part in the construction of it.
And of course, they have been trying to have a new opening, and it just keeps getting delayed. So at this stage, it's looking like Chinese New Year next year, but who knows?
Yeah, they've got the gateway and everything all in place now, so it's all ready to go.
Thank you both for coming in and answering those questions. And moving on a second that we received the report and the plan. Councillor Bahar and Gallagher, thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare it carries.
Thank you.
Alison. Thanks, Calvin. We move to item 9 on the agenda, tab 9 or page 28, Chief Executive's report. And David, I hand to you.
Mr Mayor, councillors, thank you and good afternoon. I want to spend a wee bit of time on the first item on the report, which is the Three Waters reform. And attached to the agenda is a draft of a letter that council is proposing to send to Minister Mahuta. And I just need to get some feedback comments from councillors this afternoon before we post that off. But I thought for the benefit of the public following this meeting that I would read some relevant extracts from my report. Starting with the acknowledgement that council is extremely disappointed in government's decision to make the Three Waters reform mandatory. We expected a transparent conversation to happen with our community before any decision was made, and regrettably, we haven't been able to have that discussion yet. The recent announcement by Minister Mahuta has left council feeling a lack of trust with government. Our council and mayor have been fully engaged with all Canterbury councils to understand other possible Three Waters delivery model options with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And possible options that PwC looked at included a joint council controlled organisation model that would have greater connection to our councils and our current investment in infrastructure. The disappointing thing for me personally is the growing list of unanswered questions that we have been posing to central government agencies for quite some time. And until we receive definitive response to these, it simply won't be possible for us to engage in the meaningful conversation with our communities because we don't know and haven't received the answers. And examples of some of those questions are the impact on local authorities' ability to deliver its Three Water services, particularly during the latter part of the transition process through to the 30th of June 2024. Of most significance for me is how the local voice will be given effect. Inter-council equity is an issue for all of us, as is the impact of spatial planning aligning to our council's LTP and also the investment prioritisation of the proposed entity D. We need a detailed understanding of assumptions that are built into the government model and the deliverable timeframe against those assumptions. And you've heard me make comments about financial projections and the inability to do those accurately over a 30-year period. We need further discussion on the consideration of the impact of stripping significant parts of our asset base. And for most councils, you're talking about 40% of your asset base and a similar percentage of your revenue. And of course, some stranded overheads, which will, whilst they will diminish over time, certainly have to be recovered in the first instance. Clarity around the annual cost of Three Waters services to our communities. There are still some significant question marks over that. For rural and provincial councils, clarity around responsibility for funding and maintaining rural supplies. We are receiving a lot of queries around that. The impact of land drainage and stormwater proposals and where those responsibilities will lie into the future. along with how will the partnership with Mana Whenua work? When will local communities get to have their say on the proposals? And there are a number of other unanswered questions. We will push the new entity to see greater investment in Selwyn above levels indicated in our current long-term plan analysis. We acknowledge that government has formed a working party to further review a number of issues that will have to consider as we lead through them, through the establishment of legislation and also go through the transition process. And the Mayor, councillors and staff will continue to pursue these outstanding questions as they and the Selwyn community have raised in order that we can gain clear understanding to formulate our view. I want to refer councillors to page 39 of the agenda, which is a draft of a letter that we are proposing to send to the Minister by the end of this week, and seek your comments as to the content of the letter, the matters of emphasis, and anything else that you think should be in there. And Mr. Mayor, I think we'll deal with this item before I deal with the rest of my report.
Thanks, David. Clearly articulating, and your report does, the depth of feeling and disappointment that we have. The letter I've drafted sits there, and that's based on the information and feedback that councillors have had into saying the right, keeping it brief and to the point, and obviously commenting a bit stronger on the frustration and anger, which we know is evident in our community. So, yeah, happy to take any comments or changes or alterations, but I think the key thing is actually having that message public and sending it to the Minister.
Or endorsement of the letter, as the case may be.
I think David will have a C at the front end of your, as part of the recommendation of this committee, that we support the letter and that it's endorsed by the council and it can be sent. Murray, Grant, Sophie.
Yeah, largely endorsed the letter. I'm not going to wordsmith anything. David, I guess it's really a question about process now, and you talked about that working party.
Yep.
David, do you think that's the mechanism now for us to get those questions answered? Because it doesn't seem that we're going to get them from DIA. So is that the conduit for us to now get some traction on getting those answered for our community? What's your vision there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Murray, I do. We've sort of exhausted all avenues with DIA. We've been repeatedly asking questions. I go back to the 8th of January this year, you know, with some significant questions around development contributions, particularly, which are quite significant for our district. So yes, I do think the working party is the vehicle.
Thank you. Grant?
Sam, I really want to support what you've written. I think it accurately reflects the tone of our community. I think you've done a good job of reflecting that. Especially, I think I'm really pleased that you've picked up the trust issue, because and reflect back to the meetings that we went to as council with the DIA and the Minister, where they were very explicit in saying this was a new dawn. They wanted to rebuild trust between central and local government. They were going to partner with us. A laughable trollop, isn't it? It's rubbish. And, you know, the government should be ashamed of themselves, really, and hiding the beehive or overseas is the best place for them personally. But what I'm interested in is perhaps understanding what the status is of the Timaru, Whangarei and Waimakariri legal challenge. Have you got an update for us on that at all?
I know that they've engaged a QC to try and challenge that piece of work. The detail is really about what ownership means. It's not a challenge to what the government's trying to do wholesale. It's around the meaning of ownership, and I guess the redefinition that group ownership with no meaningful construct to control might mean going forward. So that's the work that they're going to try and work out. That's why they've engaged the QC around ownership and the wording.
Because the result would be important for us, wouldn't it, if they were to find in their favour?
Oh, it'll be important for the country.
Yeah.
And it has even made me think about ownership for our council compared to our community. So who actually owns the supplies for communities that worked in the 70s and 80s to put in all our rural supplies? We say we own them. Some communities may feel that they still own them, and we look after them on their behalf. The same with halls. So it actually opens up quite a breadth of work, I think, when you start to question what the word ownership means. Sophie?
Yeah, great letter. The only part that I'd maybe add is some reference to all of those questions that we've asked, and there's not much reference to them in there. It doesn't have to be particularly detailed, but it's another example of we did our part. We were asked to ask questions. We did many times, many questions. Silence.
Cool, Sophie. I'm happy to add that. People okay with that. Shane?
Kia ora, Sam. Thank you, David, very much for the letter. I read the letter the other day, and I must say it's very succinct, gets to the point, and clearly signals our discontent, our lack of trust, and absolute disappointment with the process more than anything. And that's the clear message that I'm getting through from our constituents is what is this process throughout this process? What's in it for us? Those that have invested in what is an investment over the past however many years it's been is now being taken away from them, if not forcibly. We've planned in our long-term plan for 6% year-on-year increase through our long-term plan for the next 10 years. So in our long-term plan, we'll be okay with our current infrastructure with the investment that's planned for. At the end of this, I don't think sending a letter of disappointment or working with any type of bloody working group is actually going to have the desired outcome that we're going to need. We need to actually voice clearly what we want now coming out of this and actually bring forward the opinions of our constituents. I'm not standing on a soapbox and politicising at all. It's just the fact that if I'm walking out the door and this is the number one topic that everyone's bringing up to me, and I haven't heard from other councillors around the table yet, but I'd really like to hear from them, is the opportunity for us to, and we've spoken about it before, forward fund a lot of the projects that are in our long-term plan, to bring that forward, to borrow that, to get that done sooner. Is there opportunity to look at a rates relief for our ratepayers over the period of time before the transfer, to somehow gain a bit more respectability back with our constituents? Thank you.
David?
And if I can just jump in, Shane, and answer that question. So staff did hear that request, and you'll be aware that we've got strategy days scheduled for 26, 27 January, and that's actually one of the agenda items to bring back information to facilitate that discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Deborah?
Thanks for the letter. I hope there's an intention of actually giving this letter to Selwyn Times or another newspaper outlet, so our public can understand what we've been asking, what questions we've been asking. It's very important because everywhere I go now, I'm asked, what are we doing about Three Waters? So I would like to see that letter that we send off on behalf of our ratepayers published, so our ratepayers understand and know what was forwarded on their behalf to central government with regards to our water resources. And I'd like that to be moved as a recommendation, because I don't see it in the Chief Executive's report that actually happened. So I will move in that direction.
It will be proactively released to media, and it's already public based on today's agenda. So
not everybody reads the agenda, Sam, and a lot of people get the Selwyn Times, or they read maybe what's in their rates demand, but the rates demand won't go out until early next year. So I would really like this as published as an open letter on behalf of our ratepayers in the Selwyn Times, and I'm moving in that direction.
Can I just seek clarity on what you're asking, Debbie? You're saying you want us to pay to take out an advert to place this in the paper?
Exactly.
Okay.
You don't have to agree with me, but that is my suggestion, and I'm moving it as a recommendation.
Cool. It'll definitely, like as I said, it'll definitely be shared with all those outlets. I imagine with the high level of interest that they will be making calls about sharing it with their community, because they know how hot this topic has been, but happy to consider that. In the end, I think David you and Stephen can have a discussion around what that looks like and whether Stephen's got any advice on how that might work.
Yeah, look, the obvious place to publish the letter would be in council call, Mr. Mayor, if that was the view of the room.
Yeah. That covers it, Deborah? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like the letter as written, as sent on behalf of our ratepayers, you know, to be out there in the public arena. If you want to put it in council call, just publish the whole lot
letter,
that we're
yep.
sending through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Understand that.
David, I'll let you to move on to the next items.
Yeah, so the next items are
Point of
really
clarification.
Oh, sorry, Mark.
I just want to clarify whether Councillor Hassan was moving a second amendment or she was seeking an amendment to the resolution that's in front of us. If so, she needs a seconder to that amendment, and we need to discuss the amendment before proceeding.
Well, I think with the explanation that staff gave, Councillor Hassan was happy with the direction that we were taking, proactive released. It'll definitely be included in the Selwyn Times through paid space that we take. And so there was no seconder for the particular motion. And with the action covered, I don't think it needs to be formalised further than that unless others have a different view.
There was no need. I think it was the agreement of the meeting that it goes into council call.
I'm fine that it happens that way, but as long as it happens, right, through that particular media output, and it's the letter that we're sending, be replicated.
Yep, that's what we're saying we'll do.
Okay. So there's no sensitising, there's nothing else, it's the letter. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So back to my report, and the rest of it is really for information. Item 2, the speed limit review. Andrew will talk about that in conjunction with item 14 this afternoon. The health fluoridation amendment bill, so that was passed into law on the 9th of November, as I note in my report, comes into law 28 days after that. So what I've done for the information of councillors and the community is give some key points, and also downloaded on pages 41 and 42, just some background talking points for you if you need to engage with your respective communities. Item 4, the future of Selwyn Parks. Information that this consultation is underway at the moment, and the outcomes will be reported back to council in the new year. Item 5 is the awareness that the History Fund has been established. And item 6, and again, we'll talk about this further in Douglas's report later today, but just reference to Rolleston Town Centre, and everyone will have the opportunity over the next week or so as we have the inaugural tours of Te Ara Aotea to see what's going on there close at hand. Item 7, Mr. Mayor, is some changes to the delegations manual reflecting changes in staff appointments around the organisation. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so we'll be moving. Oh, sorry. So we'll be moving A and B, and C will add approve the Three Waters letter to be sent to the minister with an additional comment around the unanswered questions, which is Councillor McInnes raised. So I'm happy to move A, B, and C of the report. Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Second, Councillor Bland. Any comments on anything else that was in David's report? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you, David. The next item is the adoption of the proposed meeting schedule for 2022.
So procedural matter, Mr. Mayor, just getting in so that we can get diaries aligned for next year.
Yeah.
Very procedural. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Seconded, Councillor Epiha. Is there any discussion on
Yes.
this? Yes, Councillor Alexander.
Though it will not affect me next year, the continued avoidance of meetings on show week, when given the current makeup of our district and the council, it's been long gone are the days where almost all our councillors in the meeting were farmers and had to attend the Canterbury show. I still see the fact that we no longer hold a meeting, we don't hold a meeting on the Wednesday of show week and have to rearrange considerably our schedule around that is anachronistic and needs to change. Council should be able to hold its meeting on show week. It's not cup day. and that to rearrange the rest of the schedule around that is a sign of the past rather than the sign of the times. And while I accept the council probably will pass it as it is, I still think that is just causes a lot of grief and a lot of rescheduled meetings. And the irony this week was there was no show week, and we could have held the meeting in our meetings in show week. So I think it is just council needs to move forward.
Thanks, Mark. Grant?
A great chance to rebut Mr. Alexander and a piece of folly that he's brought up there. It's not show week, it's Canterbury Anniversary Day.
Exactly.
Which is our anniversary for Canterbury. And it also highlights the week of celebration of racing and Canterbury being alive. And it's, I think it's a great thing that we actually recognise it and give the opportunity for our councillors to be out and about and enjoy the long weekend if necessary. So as always, I firmly rebut your suggestion, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you for those comments. It may be a decision of the future council to change that as it's after the next election date.
Yes.
We've included it as a reserve that sits in there, but I agree it's Canterbury Anniversary, and that's the reason why we've structured the agenda the way that it is. Any further comments or questions? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is the Sycon Limited proxy appointment.
So just speaking to this fairly brief report on machinery again, Mr. Mayor, acknowledging that you are present. Sycon AGM, 4 p.m. this afternoon. Council simply needs to appoint a proxy, which is yourself, Mr. Mayor, or if anything happens in the next couple of hours, Deputy Mayor Lyle is your alternate. Acknowledge the B and C, and item D, we will be discussing director remuneration during the PX part of today's meeting.
So moved.
We'll be passing that resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. Second, Councillor Lemon. Any discussion there? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Next item is tab 12, page 50. Moved Councillor Lyle. Seconded. Councillor Bland. This is the change of classification of Park Recreation Reserve at Toswell Road. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Miller.
Page 51. I'm hoping, well, I'm absolutely certain, that it's perhaps a throwaway line from the staff, and it says, shall notably include space for possible future chlorination and or fluoridation. My understanding from my time on audit and risk was that we had expressly made provision on any renewals that we did from a risk basis that we would have chlorination equipment that we could switch on in the event of another alpine fault or earthquake or anything that needed our water to be sanitised. As a matter of course, we would have that installed. So I'm just assuming that's a throwaway line.
If you could just press the right-hand button, sorry, thanks.
Yeah, it's throwaway line. So this is just for the reclassification. The actual design of the treatment plant is underway, and as part of that design, it will include the chlorination equipment. It will include space for fluoridation at this stage.
Thanks, Grant. Nicole?
Just the entrance from the road into the park. Obviously, discussions with the neighbour regarding that coming up with a suitable barrier so they just don't have issues that they've said there has been in the past. Just double checking, I mean, you talk about foot traffic and having bollards. I asked about cyclists, and also need to look at mobility scooters and stuff like that to make sure they're access. So what are you actually looking to do as a barrier? Like you've said, as I said, the bollards, but how's that going to work?
Yeah, so the preference from Parks and Reserves was for it to be retractable bollards across the entranceway. So there would still be access for mobility scooters or cyclists. It would just prevent vehicular access, except when maintenance vehicles would need to come in where the bollards could be retracted.
No, that's good. I was hoping that was what you were meaning, so thank you.
Great, thanks for that clarification. It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. The next item is item 13, solid waste quarterly update. And it's on page 66 of today's agenda.
Right.
Murray.
Andrew had taken the liberty to do a staff tour of the TRRT, so he's on his way back. Would you like to defer that until after the transportation report?
Do people have any questions that they would like to ask of Andrew through the report, or the information is included in quite in thoroughness that we've actually got in front of us? Moved Lyle, seconded Gallagher. Oh, sorry, Jeff. All those in favour that we receive the report, say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thanks, Murray. You can let them know you can enjoy that time. We appreciate the report because it actually does show the depth of work that's been going on in that space. The next item is a transportation monthly update. Andrew Maisie is here. Andrew, thank you for the report and the work between the agenda going out and now, which I guess you'll touch on some of the submission to State Highway 75 and some other things that have come up as well. And Graham, welcome along to the meeting. Thanks for the report that's here and being here present to present. I'll hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just run through my section of the Transportation Monthly Report. So I think one of the key things was in regards to just talking about, perhaps I may talk about the plan change requests, and certainly there's a lot of work that's been going into that. In regards to the first week of November, we had 3 hearings in the 1 week, plus we are also producing evidence for a few others. So at the moment, as you probably were aware, this week, Plans Change 69 is going through its hearing processes, which is keeping a number of us entertained on that. Interestingly enough, as you'll be aware, there's the 20th of February, I think, deadline for plan changes to be heard. And so obviously there's a lot of applicants out there that are getting excited about whether or not they will have their turn, which is looking increasingly difficult in regards to that timeline. The other project just to update you on is NZ Up, Roddeston Access. As you know, post the engagement, Wakatahahi have gone away and are reviewing where they're at and what the options are. We had a very good meeting with them and the consultants on Monday, and we ran through basically all the options from pretty much doing nothing in terms of what's out there now to the ultimate, just so that we can be in a position to defend whatever option that is, again, coming out of that preferred status for the next round of engagement. And certainly from the update, I also got an update from them this morning, being Wakatahahi, and they have been in discussions with the Carter Group in terms of their proposal for roading access through the block. Also to our folk down the south end of Jones Road, such as the RV Centre, New Zealand Trucking, Freight Forum. And so they're basically pretty much, I'm pretty confident they're doing the rounds in terms of talking to all the people they need to talk to, so that we're in a really strong position in the new year to go out with a well conceived and documented option or options on that access project. So that's good. The other projects as regards to the State Highway 73 West Melbourne traffic signals, we had a good initial meeting of the project advisory group, which was attended by Councillor Reid as well. That went well. I think the community representatives were very pleased to understand the basis of that project and how it all needed to work together, which is relatively complex, and particularly, you know, the issues around property purchase that need to occur to make that all happen within the time frame that we're expecting. The other one added to the report this month is just referencing the Tankard's road sealing. If you have been past Lincoln recently, you'll be seeing that the Tankard's road is between Springs Road and Birches Road has been pretty much dug up and replaced. In terms of being able to get that sealed, the subsurface conditions on Tankard's road were such that essentially we had to do that. And fortunately, as you're maybe aware, it's a cost share arrangement between the council and Fletcher Homes. So we're sharing the cost of that in regards to that project. And I think we'll have a very good bit of section of road through there when it's finished, because I think it's going to be a well-used section of road in the future. Greater Christchurch Partnership, I mentioned in there around, we've done a recent stock take of all our currently programmed transport investments to determine what changes in direction and funding are needed to meet our challenges going forward, such as mode shift, climate change and things like that. Once that's been finalised, I'll be happy to append that to the next transport meeting, so you've got it there directly. I think it's gone to the likes of, or going to the likes of CAG and the partnership, but I'll do that directly. And really the other aspect was just I appended the minutes from the recent Regional Road Safety Working Group for your information. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it for my section of the report. And if there's no questions on that, we can move on to the draft submission if you like. Okay. All right. Well, as you're probably well aware, Waimakariri have gone out previously for engagement on suggestions to improve the safety on state highways 73, 75 and 74, all related to that sort of Banks Peninsula type of connectivity. Obviously, we have State Highway 75 going through our district, and we rely on that quite a lot, obviously, in terms of linking to our own local network and providing that sub-regional link between, for instance, State Highway and 73 and the role that plays. So time was the essence, and so I managed to get the draft just finished. So I'm sorry for the delay in getting it to you, but it was important to get it to you so that we can have a discussion, considering that submissions periods closes on the 3rd of December, I think it is. So basically what they're doing is that in terms of making or looking to make safety gains on State Highway 75 is blanket reductions in speed limits. And so while there's some, I'll call them no-brainers in regards to, for instance, lowering the speed limit through Little River and up to Hilltop and down and through to Akaroa, I think probably the more contentious one is the lowering of the 100k speed limit between south of Horswell and, well, for our district, Motuakara, and obviously right through to Little River. And I think that's the one that's causing the most angst. I think from council's perspective in regards to its submission, basically what I have focused on is pretty much saying, well, yes, we understand we need to make improvements on that corridor, but just solely relying on blanket speed limit reductions is probably a missed opportunity in regards to also needing to consider what engineering up we can do to retain speed limits on that section of a highway, because it's used by a diverse range of users over a wide range of times. We go from anywhere for peak periods like holiday periods, long weekends, when the road is congested, is busy and speeds need to probably be lower, to those times outside those where basically the road's empty and 100k limit is probably perfectly acceptable. It's trying to find the right balance, and I'm trying to, through our submission, encourage Waimakariri to look at some of those other options in terms of engineering up, in terms of, for instance, using variable speed limits to better target those peak periods to try and encourage perhaps a better balance in this aspect, as opposed to basically just trying to wind everything down and getting to a situation where actually a lot of people may not actually obey the proposed 80k speed limit. So it's a fine balance, and my submission, I hope, reflects that aspect and how council may wish to engage with Waimakariri further on that.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, thank you for doing that with quite a short turnaround for the submission. A couple of questions from councillors, then we can talk about how we deal with the submission as well. So Deborah and Nicole.
Thank you. Look, just with regards to the major strategic transport projects, the Rolleston State Highway access, when we had a presentation come to us outlining, you know, the possibility of slip lanes, etc., I note that along the State Highway, there are certain developments that are actually occurring with regards to the possibility of some of the planning proposals. And I just wonder, is there any coordination happening with the development of those projects, with both us, our consenting, and the Transport Agency?
Absolutely. In terms of, for instance, all the plan changes, proposed plan changes down Duns Crossing Road, that is being factored into all the decision making or the optioneering, if you want to put it that way, in regards to how, if those occur, what the implications are. So Wakatahahi have, as part of their project team for NZ Up, their consenting planners involved in all of this, and so they're reviewing all that that's going on at the moment and feeding it into their process, and vice versa, they're feeding it into our processes as well. So if you've got the opportunity or had the opportunity to read any of the council's submissions or evidence that it's produced on some of those plan changes down there, you'll see the reference to NZ Up and how it is needing to integrate outcomes.
Thanks, Andrew, for your report and attaching the Regional Road Safety Working Group minutes on that. Just wondering about the makeup of the group, because I'm looking at other councils have more than one member, and I don't want to say they're smaller councils. I'm just wondering, because we've only got one member, and I'm just wondering how the makeup is and whether it's proportional for council size, or is there some other way that the membership is made up of, if you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this is a strategic working group, and so basically we don't get down into the detail. So usually I would say that the one representative per organisation is probably appropriate. Certainly the bulk of the membership, if you want to put it that way, is made up by technical, roading and transport officers, but our political, if you want to put it that way, link and representation is provided by Mayor Dan Gordon back through to the RTC and likes of the mayoral forum and things like that.
So I'm not meaning about political level, I'm meaning about staff level. Obviously I can't tell from the names here whether they're staff or what, but I'm assuming they're staff. But I mean, I see that Kaikoura's got 2, Timuru's got 2, Ashburton's got 3 members. We've got 1. I mean, if we're able to have another one, that's why the question I'm asking.
Okay, understand the point. I think the thing is that not all members turn up at the same time. And it's usually sometimes with those other councils, it's spread between those staff. Whereas, for instance, us, I am obviously the key contact, and 99.9% of the time I'm there.
And because you meet here, right?
Sorry?
You meet here.
Yeah, we usually meet here. So what? Yeah, which is handy.
Because it's not like you've got far to go. But that's all right. I just had to raise the question to find out, because we want to make sure that we've got suitable representation on this committee. And as these guys have said, I mean, you are capable of being good membership on this, but.
Yeah, no, I understand the point, but generally only one representative per organisation turns up generally at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Just a couple of questions around growth. And I think on page 97, 4.2.1, the MRT interim report, I suppose increasingly it's really worrying me that with the explosive growth and plan changes we're receiving, where are we going to stick this stuff? I guess I'm sort of seeking assurance that we still have got the ground or the location to put wherever our transport hub where it might be. We've talked about the railway site and help it or wherever it might be, or even in the context of our town centre, where does it go and what does it look like? I guess I'm increasingly concerned that that's going to be an issue for us. Can you give me some confidence, or is it something that we really need to address quite soon?
No, I can give you confidence on that, because we're working closely with the strategy planners on obviously developing our spatial plan, which feeds into the 2050 spatial plan and vice versa. So even earlier this week, I had a meeting with Ben Bard, and we were working through where potentially these key corridors are, where we may need to locate PT stations, hubs, whatever you like to call it. So we're certainly trying to work towards that, and I would hope that as we work through the spatial planning exercise, that information will start being presented to you in terms of our thinking. But I agree, it's a real issue that we need to keep our eye on the ball on in regards to making sure that we recognise and plan for future opportunities.
I understand there's quite a lovely site for a train station on the main street of Prebbleton, large section with quite a character house on.
I wouldn't dare to make comment on that.
Second question, which is probably more important for me and Nicole, is have we made any progress with the new subdivision proposals about getting our footpath width increased for these new proposals? Are we still batting at 1.5s?
As I understand it, our new district plan requirements is 1.8, and our engineering code of practice is heading towards that, introducing that as well.
So the new ones approved, like plan change, well, let's say 69 gets approved, will have 1.8s.
That would be my expectations, that with all these new developments and plan changes that would come through, and certainly also the emphasis on providing a footpath on both sides of the road for those heavier volumed roads and important roads like those that go to schools and things like that.
Why I bring it up is the feedback from Prebbleton on the Tossville Road left-hand side wider strip is really appreciated by the local community. I suppose you're getting the same, Malcolm, was saying it's just far superior to the standardised 1.5s, and just the usability of it, people are using it more significantly as well. So
yeah, and that's good to hear. That is, though, however, part of the walk cycle linkage for the rail trail, and so that's been put in, I believe, at 2.5 metres, which is our standard for that. So you can't say it's a normal footpath, it's part of that linkage, which is why it's that wide.
Yeah, I think I was batting for 2 metres, but I got brought back to 1.8, didn't we, Nicole? I think, didn't we, somehow?
What was that?
Weren't we batting for 2 metres, but we got brought back to 1.8 or something? Was it?
That was for footpaths, so wasn't it?
That's right. That's the distinction. Yeah. As footpaths were 1.5, and now we're working towards 1.8. For the combined footpath cycleways, the minimum is 2.5, and that hasn't changed.
So I'll make comment on the submissions when you open that part of it. Yeah. Thank you very much for your work on that. The key issue now is we're now down to 2 arterials, which is State Highway 75 and Shands at 100 kilometres an hour. And if we don't protect those, our commuter zone is going to be a real issue for us. I was out at Leaston yesterday and got some very strong feedback from Leaston and Southbridge residents that they are not happy with the reductions in speed limits as they come try to commute. And so it's creating an issue for them, and that's the same feedback from Little River and our local environment. Is there is a significant commuter belt there now which is wanting to remain commutable, and as you described, NZTA should be putting cash into slow vehicle bays and those type of things to assist the transport rather than just bringing the speed limit down to cover up engineering deficiencies.
Thanks, Grant. Oh.
Just wanted to follow on from Grant's comments about asking about district plan. I don't want to talk about the district plan because I'm on the hearings panel for that, as Andrew's aware. But just to brought up about the engineering codes, just wondering the date on that and when there's going to be the new review or that sort of thing. So Mary, I'm looking at you.
I just wanted to confirm that question. You're looking for
Is it
timing?
engineering codes, engineering standards, our engineering standards review?
Yep.
When that's going to be complete and
Okay. Well, they're operational now.
Okay.
In terms of being used. They're being used by the development engineering team. We were probably waiting to try to line up a wee bit of the district plan, but they are being used. And they have been through the process with the consultants and the contractors and that as well. So, look, I think we will bring them back in the new year to council,
okay,
because then you'll have a better understanding what they contain. It can be quite technical. So,
no, that's good because
we might want to put that on an action statement because it'd be quite good to have a date for that.
Thank you. Because when I looked up on the website, it was 2012 or something. I don't know what it is now, but last time. Now, just with the letter, I think the letter's good. I've only had an opportunity to have a quick look through it, but on the 4th paragraph when we talk about errant motorcyclists, I think just generally, I would say drivers as opposed to, motorists as opposed to motorcyclists, if we can have that. Thank you. Just anyone speeding is not acceptable.
Yep. Thank you. A couple of other things that have come up that sort of fit in the space around strategic thinking. The MRT route and wanting an outcome is certainly something that Greater Christchurch Partnership continues to push. And I think some of the conversation has been around how we don't just want an outcome sometime in the future and we're waiting for that, but how we see continual improvement between now and then around the public transport offering for Selwyn. And that's reflected in the conversation this morning that ECAN gave to us around the review of fares. But even that's just a review of fares for the current system, not actually providing an enhanced system for Selwyn to the degree that I think that we would want. So we need to keep pushing on the MRT answer, because it's a really key piece and it's a key investment driver for the government as well, so co-funding. But we also need to think about how the existing bus system can be expanded to better service our community now, because we're not at the density or the population where MRT makes sense to push, play and invest at the moment. So just those two things we need both hands in both camps, pushing them along. So Andrew, thank you for the work that you're doing there. And the second is the Regional Transport Committee on Thursday last week met. There's a presentation on Brom Street. I'm guessing it's the same presentation that NZTA wanted to share with us, and they will be bringing to us in December. And you may have seen some of the publicity around the changes that they're making there. The key changes that they're adding the third lane to Brom Street, which is a T2 and public transport route, removing the parking along most of Brom Street. They're taking away a lot of the right-hand turns from Brom Street onto the side streets, and increasing the number of right turn arrows at lights onto Brom Street from a number of the side streets. The first set of lights where you come off the motorway are also putting in a pedestrian overbridge across Brom Street, so that'll remove that first set of lights and the immediate sort of 100k, 60k red light that we currently experience at the end. So they'll present that in detail when they come and talk through the range of options that they've looked through, but just for your information, that's the angle that they're heading. Grant?
Yeah, it's sort of what you just said, Sam, I endorse, but what concerned me, I suppose, is that statement about we haven't got the density or population yet. And I think probably Nicole's better equipped to talk about it than us, being ex-resident of Auckland, but you know, the Dove and Moy Robertson statements of the past, and everyone sort of laughed at it and said, oh, don't be stupid, you don't need it in Auckland. We're in that situation here now, and unless we actually push play and plan and deliver it, we're going to be in the same situation that Auckland is, where if we wait for density and population before we put it in, we're too late. And that's what I think our problem is that we're waiting for the population and density rather than putting the infrastructure in first. And Selwyn's been really good at doing infrastructure in advance. I think that's perhaps where we should be heading. We're advocating.
We'll take that on board for sure, and we're not delaying any of the planning and the protection of the land. That's the key part to begin with, deciding the route. Shane.
Kia ora, Andrew, thanks very much for the report. Just sort of at a high level, percentage-wise, when reducing road speed limits, what percentage would you say is based around safety and what percentage is around infrastructure and engineering?
Not sure I could easily answer that question, to be honest.
That's some of the question that's coming through from the community when they're looking at road speed reductions, say from Leeston to Doyleston. They're saying, well, is it safety or is it infrastructure? And should the council be investing into the roads more to bring the safety of the road up if it is percentage-wise more on the infrastructure side?
Yeah, I can't necessarily sit here and quote you a percentage. What I can say is that I believe that there is a combination between engineering up and speed limit reductions to be able to cater for situations that can't be resolved by either one or the other. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. The section of Leeston Road between Doyleston and Leeston Township, we've introduced an 80k speed limit on that. Now, we could have turned around and said, well, let's widen that. But in actual fact, what we could have done is actually increase vehicle speeds. So it's around making and understanding how that route needs to work and understanding where the risks are and identifying those risks and targeting them in the right way. And that's where, for instance, in the submission for State Highway 75, what we're suggesting is that we believe that we can, with investment in the engineering, we can still keep safety and the efficiency of the route without compromising one or the other. And I think that's the balance that you always got to try and work towards.
Thanks, Andrew. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. It's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, isn't it, when we talk about mass rapid transit? Do we put the provision for it in before the growth, or do we have the growth and then put it in? I think wise planning is put it in first. And I've said that for a long time. We'll enable large subdivisions, and sometime later, we put a bus route through. In the meantime, the people have habitualised themselves into using cars, and they don't get on the public transport. Overseas, they put public transport in when the first houses arrive, so that people can choose to use public transport when they arrive. And I think ECAN have got it wrong. I think it's like the fare reviews. They've got it wrong. We need to have a public transport system that's attractive and affordable when people arrive in our district, not some years later. And so I really think that we as a council need to be stressing that it's no good waiting until people are living here, habitualised into cars, then throwing a bus at them and saying, oh, look, the bus is empty. It's between ECAN and ourselves, it's our fault. And the speed limit reductions, I think strategically they are a good idea. We have a very poor driving standards in Selwyn. Stop signs are viewed as giveaways at best. And if we're reducing speeds to 80k, that makes the survivability of an impact when somebody's forgotten that a stop sign means stop, increases it considerably. And for most of our routes, the difference between 80k and 100k does not significantly add to the journey time. Take from the Leeston to Lincoln. You reduce that stretch to 80k, but then you come to Dawston, which is 50k anyway. And so there's reductions all the way along. I don't think it adds significantly to the journey time. It adds significantly to the safety. And infrastructure costs, yeah, probably saves us a bob or two, not widening the road, but that's actually probably a wise investment, not widening the road. As Andrew has noted, wider roads encourage higher speeds, which encourage bigger accidents. So I think we've got to find that right balance, and sometimes lowering some of the routes is the best way to go. The anecdote I can use is when we lowered Madison's Road to 80k. My wife complained, and then she said, "Oh, but in peak times, that's all I can do anyway." So in fact, it reflected the reality rather than the possibility, and made it safer. And I think safety, the road to zero, is something we've always got to focus on. One person killed on our roads is one too many.
Thanks, Mark. We're only halfway through this report. We've got Graham to present. Sophie's got the last question for Andrew.
Yeah, it's more that, so the whole PD future thing at the moment, so we heard from ECAN this morning, and they still talk about the time amount it takes to do a business case for any route change, the cost of buying another bus, and the lead time for getting the bus in the country, even if it wasn't built here, and all that sort of thing. And just reflecting that, you know, the government's identified that we need to intensify housing. There are all sorts of different barriers that make that a good thing, but also then how do you deal with all the other infrastructure? And then part of that is to do with public transport. Do you see, this is tell me if it's just how long is a piece of string. Do you think this is actually going to happen as fast as we probably need and should do it? Because the wheels of government turn very slowly, and so do funding.
If I was being brutally honest, I would say no. And I think it's representative of Councillor Alexander's comments that for years, if not decades, as Selwyn has been growing in our main townships, we have been pushing ECAN to provide services into our new development areas. And for instance, the fact that we haven't got a PT route through the south of Lincoln, Tifariki and all that type of thing, to me just doesn't make sense. The point is that it comes down to funding. And as you know, the funding of PT is a complicated beast, and the fact that it relies on what you get through from the fares to what you get through from rates and also from Wakatahahi funding. as with all transport matters, it all comes through from that Whakatahahi perspective. And if ECAN haven't got sufficient funds to be able to buy the buses, employ the drivers, put in new routes, well, that's the fundamental problem. And it's not going to be solved easily without needing some radical rethink in terms of how, for instance, PT is funded, or a radical course of action in regards to increasing funding for PT. So I may have sort of made the flippant comment, I think, at the last meeting, that when the intensification bill came out, that, all right, where's the government's commitment now to provide more funding for walking, cycling and PT? Well, that's exactly what we need to see. And with the issues of climate change breathing down our necks, we are going to have to be in a position of making a step change somehow fairly soon. And at the moment, there's not a lot of sort of good news on the horizon in regards to being able to do that, apart from what we need to do ourselves in regards to getting our future land use and transport integrated as best as we possible can, so we can meet the challenges of the future. But we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Graham.
Good afternoon. Roading maintenance was a month of general maintenance, really, just coming out of winter. Capital works, low cost, low risk projects, Whedon's Ross Road seal widening, the tender evaluation has been completed, and that will be reported to the next council meeting. Harper Canal Bridge replacement works have commenced, which is great news. Piling's underway. Prebbleton intersections, Shands Blake's is open, and Springs Marshes was surfaced last week, and we'll have a practical completion inspection this coming Friday. Rolleston Drive, Tennyson Street traffic signals, was awarded to Isaac Construction, and they're out there now locating services. The new footpath connections contract went out to tender last Friday. Road safety, there's a number of programs going out before Christmas. And that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Deborah, sorry, so you had your light on.
Oh, sorry.
Bob?
Yeah, just where is the Whitecliff Bridge damage? Has that been sorted all yet?
Yeah, so we've received a report from the inspection of the structural engineers, and we're investigating that at the moment.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Graham. Are you able to email around what the footpath projects list is, so we can see what's coming up? I know I believe it's one that was deferred from last financial year, and just seeing whether that one's in there too.
Yep.
Thank you, Andrew. And just road safety. So this considerate parking campaign are talking about compliance building and planning working together. Now, my understanding, so it's basically about making sure that routes, so there's footpaths available for kids walking to along school routes and such like. And this is a serious issue, and it just come across this week with one of our council contractors on Tennyson Street, blocking a footpath, then putting, I don't know how they think kids will react to footpath closed, please use the other side, when there's a zebra crossing that they normally use only about 15 metres further north that they can't get to. So this is now, it's taken a few days to get sorted out, that there will be people helping the kids cross the road, but these need to be part of what is done with these projects, with these contractors, because this is really dangerous. And so we've got the traffic lights coming up. We've told the school that we keep access ways so that kids can get through. And now there's just a random one that came up in the middle of all of that. So, sorry, that's my rant, but I just want to emphasise how important it is to ensure that particularly children do have safe routes to get to and from school. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane.
Kia ora, Graham, thanks for the report. Is there any indication of when the Chamberlain's Ford Bridge will be remediated and speed returned to normal? And secondly, the reduced speed programs, will they be run in conjunction with the speed lowering limits?
Chamberlain's Ford Bridge, there was an issue with the fibre optic and we're waiting for Downer to fix that. The guardrails, while it looks like they're complete, they're not safe, and that's why the speed restriction's in place. So we're waiting on Downers.
And the speed campaigns, they'll be run in conjunction with the lowering of the limits around December?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I'd echo what Councillor Reid has said about that, but I'm actually would say that I'm pleased to see that the number of departments in council are going to work together on this, because with our building growth, it's not uncommon to see the builders and tradesmen completely obscuring footpaths at the time that children are going to and from school, which pushes the kids out onto the roadway, which is just absolutely nuts. And it does my head in to try to get them to shift. So with all the teams working together on this, hopefully we can make a significant difference and make the tradespeople aware that, you know, these are footpaths, not car parks, and that they're intended to allow our children, particularly our children, safe access to and from school. Is incredibly important. It's incredibly frustrating to see that being obstructed all the time. So I'm actually emphasising, I'm really pleased to see that we've got a pan-council approach to this, because that's what I think it requires.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversation, and Graham for being here today. A couple of things here to follow up on, and thanks for the information back to councillors. We need to receive the report, but also approve the submission as submitted, circulated to councillors, which can be included in the minutes going forward. It is tabled at this meeting.
Yep.
Andrew's got that noted. Moved Bob, seconded Sophie. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next item is property report, tab 15, page 115. Douglas. Yeah, this report follows the format that we've had in the past, with red spaces highlighting any changes from last time. Thank you, Councillor Lyle, and seconded Councillor Alexander. Right. Douglas, hand to you, and just you take us through the highlights, please.
Yeah, I'd like to two items on one on Te Arotia, one on the Hororata Community Centre. In particular, I want to add some more information, if that's okay. Aquatic Centre project, we're pretty well there. But obviously, a bit of a push into December to get the work done and open pre-Christmas. So it's all following well. Hopefully, you all enjoyed your visit to Te Arotia this morning. I just want to draw your attention to, as you would have noted, there are a few landscape issues around the outside, not complete. We had hoped these things would be pretty well complete by the end of November, but we're just having a wee bit of trouble getting final completion on a few works. So it may now be more into just before Christmas, before some items are actually 100% complete. So it's just a combination of COVID, getting trades on site, and a few items not quite fitting as had expected. So there's a wee bit of work got to be done by contractors to make that work. So just really bring that to your attention. But the space will still be able to be utilised. Apart from that, Richard, I've got nothing to add on any other item until we get to the Hororata item, unless anyone's got any questions from there.
Thank you. Two sets of questions. One is some feedback that I got from the community around our landscaping at the Selwyn Aquatic Centre, which I talked to you about this morning. That as a frequent user there, had a number of community members come up to me expressing their disappointment on the landscaping on the car park side, where the ground has been prepared for planting for both hydro seeding and gardens, and broadleaf weeds had been left untreated and unremoved, and now they've flourished much more than the grasses have. And just community disappointment that the contractor had appeared to not make any attempt to treat that. That's my first comment. The second question is on the Mead Hall, where there's a comment on page 120. The concept plan is more extensive and we're seeking updated costs. Just some assurance it's not going to end up a little bit along the travel of Sheffield, where we started with a project with a relatively modest budget, but as we got into it, it got away on us and became somewhat higher, and that if we'd known the final cost when we started, we might not have started. Is that why we're getting the updates?
Yeah, correct. And I do apologise on that SAC landscaping. I'll just chase that up with Armitage and their subcontractor.
Yeah, another question just with SAC I've been asked about, and it's sort of occurring as well, because the lane ropes around the other side and have been for some time because of something that was to do with the lining of the pool. I'm just wondering how much longer that's going to continue. I've been asked that a few times.
I think we'll find we're running the opposite way at the moment to help out with COVID management of the site.
Okay.
So that children or people can get in and out. So that will be there for a while, I think you'll find, which is one of the pluses that we can do that with.
So the issue we had originally, because it was done the other way, my understanding, with something to do with the liner originally, wasn't it? So that's not the issue now, because I would have thought that wouldn't have been.
Correct.
No, that's good, because that is what I thought. But then trying to explain, well, I don't know why they're still like that. So thank you.
It's also to do with Learn to Swim, that with running the lanes across the constant depth, the shallower lanes are more easily used for Learn to Swim, whereas if they run from deep to shallow, it's because of the design of the pool, it's harder to make work for the Learn to Swim classes. So I believe that the lane ropes will stay that way until the new pool is opened or the school holidays happen, whichever happens first.
Great. Douglas, we'll move on to the next item. Horata was your next one.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Might be useful if yourself or Councillor Mugford made comment initially, but I just I did issue an email yesterday afternoon, which some of you may not have read, but maybe if the Worship and Councillor Mugford just can make some introductory comment about our meeting with Go Horata on Monday night. Go Horata, just for memory, is all the various groups, including reps from the Horata Community Trust, who are working together under making improved community spaces and outcomes for the Horata community.
Yep, happy for Bob to talk to it as well. Within 2 minutes of being in the meeting, a proposal was put to us that requested that they take over the running of the provision of a new community hub on council land in the reserve. As part of that, they would also look to keep the hall and land around the existing hall, and that they would run that project again separate than us. Bob and I and Douglas said that we're in no position at a meeting there to be able to offer an answer to that, but that we would bring it back to this group and see whether or not there was any willingness to enter into that discussion, or whether there was a repulsion from further discussion. Yeah, Bob, do you have?
Yeah, I think really what Douglas said is really the crux of the whole thing. We've talked about it around this table and with the whole communities behind it and those sorts of things. And I think Monday night showed there was at least one representative from every committee in the community, including the church, the school, and everybody else. So it is a community that are getting together to do this. But the other thing is, I don't think we can forget about is we've got a benefactor who's a multimillionaire who's prepared to put a reasonable amount of money into this project to make it work for the people of Horata with those strings attached. So I think, you might say that, like, if we give them this hall, that they'll be back in 6 months because they won't be able to do it. I don't believe that's a fact. I really believe they have the wherewithal to go ahead with what they want to do. The hall is a very tired hall, and there are councillors here that have been in and had a look at this hall. It is very tired. It has had very little maintenance on it for 10 years, and it needs a lot of work. And I'm not sure whether it would be in council's interest to do a lot of this work, to be quite honest. So if they want to keep it, they've got another problem. The local museum, the floor has fallen out of it completely, so it's closed. So they would like somewhere to house some of their bits and pieces as well, but that would be up to them. So I'm for it because I think it would get something off our books that is always going to be a lot of work. And I can see it actually being another Sheffield possibly, that if we start working on it. So I'd like to see it go.
Thanks, Bob. Without getting into the depths of the twos and fours against or with building a facility in Hororata, which is part of the LTP, which has already been decided and sits within our long-term plan and is funded. This is really about a different process to provide an outcome for a community. And I'm open to that discussion, but I do think we need to be very clear on the terms and the detail and the contract and many other things that would need to be worked through to sit around, which at the moment is just an idea. So it's, be interested in the feedback of other councillors as to whether they're open to that suggestion or not. We've got Mark, Sophie and David.
I'm not opposed to continuing discussions. I think that there certainly needs to be very clear parameters. Are they asking us for council to sell them the old Hauland site as is, whereas on that basis and have no financial obligations going forward? In their letter dated 23rd of November, they talk about council contributing $1 million to a new community centre that they would own on the reserve, and that council would continue to contribute rates funding towards the operation of it. Now, that's not a model that we've considered anywhere else in the district, and I think that would need to be at least an annual plan, if not a long-term plan discussion, because that's an entirely new model of, normally it's council, community groups contribute to council funding to a community centre that council owns and runs, rather than vice versa. So I'm not at all opposed to further conversations with the group, and I agree that they have admirable aims and great support from the community. But these models have fishhooks that really need to be well considered and not put council in a difficult position going forward. There are many other community centres, community halls in the district that council does not own, does not operate, and does not contribute towards, who would be under this model queuing up saying, me too. And the implications there have to be clearly understood.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting proposal, but I support exploring it just because it's quite interesting sometimes to find out, how would something different work in practice. And, shouldn't be ashamed of doing something differently if that's potentially going to get a better outcome for the community. Definitely got questions around the whole operational costs and staffing and everything, though. It kind of made me think or worry a wee bit about how, there's the whole Rolleston College thing with a PPP building, which is owned by somebody else and puts great deal of limitations, but then it's got to be operating in a certain way because of how the owner requires it to be. But they Go Hororata, when they came to see us at the LTP, were very keen on the whole district-wide rate and how that contributes to outcomes for Hororata, which is great. But it's that balance of how it all works out. But definitely up for the conversation.
Thank you, David.
I'm sort of in the Mark Alexander camp. I think we do need a feasibility, but I think we need to be very wary. Firstly, these facilities cost a lot of money. There is not one facility anywhere that operates at a profit or even breaks even. So I understand the noble attempt to pop money into the capex cost of it, but a serious question mark over who's going to pay the operating cost and how long that would be. Second thing, the feasibility has got to consider the impact on other facilities, Glenroy, Glen Tunnel and a couple of others. Remember, we're building something in a very low or zero growth area. So their usage is going to be coming from those other facilities. At the moment, that will have impact. Also, the impact on the farm, there's an opportunity to tidy up our relationship with that operation. And the domain, there's a racetrack there at the moment that people are training horses on, and a couple of community events. So you're potentially introducing other conversations, other people's conversations. Also need to be wary of the precedent that we would be setting. So if we say yes to this, you've said yes to all future applications. And something that we've just had in the past, I'm thinking of Lakeside, possibly Dunsandel, where we, we're under a bit of pressure as well. So by all means undertake the feasibility, but be very, very wary the potential outcomes and the other relationships.
Oh, yeah, support the feasibility as well. Just for clarity, they're talking about gifting ownership of the existing infrastructure and or possibility of a commercial lease. Is that on a new facility?
I think you described that everything's on the table. Their preference is council to pass over ownership of land and buildings and provide annual funding. But that's, as we're saying here, a number have said, would be outside our current policies. So we have identified that with the group. So
I'd like to just support what Bob has said. I like the idea of giving them have a deal with them over the haul, but get that part done before we get into the possibility of giving them a land for a new build. If they're keen and have got the money to upgrade the hall and have it as their own facility and run it by themselves, well, good on them, and I think they have got the willpower and the people behind them to do it. So that would be the feelings that I have.
You can't normally have your cake and eat it too. There's a lot of fish hooks, as everybody said. What happens in 10 years' time when it's not being used? And the population hasn't grown, and we're either having to shut Glen Tunnel or it, and daggers are drawn across the whole community. You know, go forward slowly with a massive MOU, I would say.
Douglas, I think there's a direction there around cautious stepping forward into thinking about what the next steps would look like and getting some certainty around, you know, what would be negotiated in or out of any sort of change and transition. Next up.
Yep, thank you. I had nothing else in the report that I want to bring to council attention unless there's questions.
Just can I have absolute clarity what's been decided here? Are we saying Douglas go away and sort of start negotiating, or are we sort of saying bring some proposals back to council that we consider before we go back to Go High Rata? Because it needs to be quite clear what we are agreeing to here. There's a lot of enthusiasm and sort of very loose talk here. Can you just give me absolute clarity what's been decided here?
Yeah, I think that I think that it needs to be a job that Douglas works on with the trust, because if it was just going to be our solution, we've got our way of working, and this is outside of that. So happy to, if councillors want Douglas to come up with a range of options, but I do think that trying to understand what's going to work so that we get an outcome is going to be a key part of that. So my understanding was from here, Douglas would go back and talk to the trust, think about how they might be able to think about what future might look like, so that we can then be presented back with something that has at least got a possibility of working, rather than us or Douglas spending a lot of time on something that then just gets rubbished and thrown out at the end. But does that work for people?
Could we have some sort of resolution that outline, like, because this is, I agree with Grant. Now
I just want to, what I'm afraid of is we've gone through quite a difficult LTP discussion.
Yes.
We've created an outcome. It seems like it's the scale. Is it the scale that's the issue? Our scale versus their desired scale is probably the issue. And if you have a very wishy-washy loose resolution today, it gives the potential in saying, well, yeah, we're on, this is a goer, without it actually having, as David said, due consideration of, does this fit with our network strategy? Does this align with our future growth patterns? What's the precedent setting? Like all of you, I'm keen to see local communities thrive and succeed. And we always pride ourselves on being enablers if we can. But I just want to be certain exactly what we're agreeing today before it leaves the room, that's all.
So today isn't about redoing the LTP. So it's already a project that's already happening. This is now about how a project is achieved. And so are we open to a discussion about a project that currently sits in an LTP being achieved a different way? And if so, give us a resolution. Like I'm with you on that. Let's be clear about what we're asking for around the achievement of the outcome that currently sits approved.
I made 2 points which might just help in the email. The first one is that staff and elected members' advanced discussion related to the Go Higher Rata request is outlined in points 1 to 4 of the letter. There's no expectation we'll come to an answer, but we just need to dig the bits out. Everything you've said, we identified those on Monday. This is something though that is worth exploring, because if there's a group we can deliver it, but there are a pile of issues that we need to bring to the attention, and some of those the farmers are a big one, which we want to bring on the table. Probably the only one that the Hororata, the feasibility study on the Hororata Hall for the heritage request. Last time I spoke to anyone about it 4 to 6 weeks ago, it looked like it wasn't really going to go anywhere, but their building has deteriorated and it seems to have a bit more legs, I suppose, Councillor Mugford, and we probably need to bring to some point as to whether there's any merits or not of a museum, and we can probably all have a view here right now, but we probably just need to get that, and they need about 40,000 to actually cost up to see what it would be worth. I mean, we all know, museums, as the CEO said, these things don't make money. So we do need to probably spend, but we're really clear, if we're going to put any money in, it's part of that $1 million. It's not additional money. So to some degree, we just need to nail that issue, I think, so that we don't have it poking around on us over the next couple of years. So is spending the money we set aside, no additional money.
Just thinking of a resolution, do we want to have something that says we request staff report back on the scope of the discussion and possible outcomes of any transfer to a future meeting, or we put a date on the meeting? That gives Douglas the range of things that we're actually wanting to do internally. It means Kelvin, Denise get involved in what the discussion looked like around, the wider implications of what it may look like. Today is just about a direction. It's not about a decision. So we want a direction of a report back with more detail, I would have thought.
Sam, I think there's 2 issues here, and we're liable to get them crossed. There's the future of the existing hall. That's issue 1 in my mind.
Sorry, say that again, mate.
The future of the existing hall. Do we sell it to a community group and or the land, or lease them the land and sell them the hall? That's issue 1. Yeah. Issue 2 is the proposed new facility of which we have an LTP budget. And there's a proposal that completely outside of what we'd normally do, that the community builds and owns it on the reserve, presumably with some sort of land lease, and we put $1 million into it, plus some rate funding for its operational costs. That's issue 2, and that's completely different. And I think I'm trying to get it in my mind that we need to deal with the 2 issues. The first of which is, and it could be relatively simple, they come up with an offer for the existing hall in a land lease, and we say, yep, sweet, gone, it's yours, you maintain it, we're shifted of it. It's no longer our responsibility. You get nothing else. It's your building, go for it. And then issue 2 is about the proposals for a new community centre on the reserve, and it's funding and operational things, and that's going to take a lot longer. So let's just try and get it clear in my mind, because that's what I see. There's 2 separate discussions going on. One could be resolved quite quickly. They could come up with a purchase and a lease and could be done pretty quickly for the old hall. The new one's going to take a whole lot longer, because what they've proposing is a whole new can of worms that has impacts wider than Hororata. And as others have said, there's things like consideration of our network planning of community facilities. Hororata was never a centre that we were going to put a lot of money and investment into a facility, given our network. So if we have a resolution, I think it needs to reflect that there's 2 parts to the discussion.
Thanks, Mark. The funding that currently sits within the LTP, to my mind, is contingent on the sale of the existing hall and land. Around it, there was 400 of the $1 million, so the leftover was only 600 of that. So they're not quite as separate as we might want to think they are. But I don't want to go. There's going to be a lot of comment here around some extra detail around a proposal you've had 48 hours to think about with no detail, and I don't know that's going to be particularly constructive use of our time. And so, David, I'll just get you to talk about the process so that we can have a constructive conversation and think about a meaningful outcome.
So we're in danger of trying to write this on the hoof. We've only had 48 hours. My recommendation is that we stop the conversation on the subject, but rather request staff to prepare a paper back to the meeting on the 8th of December, identifying exactly what it is that we propose to do. And that will give all of the clarity, Grant, going back to your question, that we're seeking, and we'll be able to debate it with that paper and those proposed actions in front of us.
I think we can hold off any further comment on the hall until then. So keen to all talk, but I'm just, is it really going to add to anything new that we've got in the recommendation? You think it is? Righto. Sophie, Bob, Jeff.
Sorry, I will try to be quick. I was just going to ask it would be really good for the documents that were emailed round. They're not part of the agenda, so it would be really good to have them added to the record of this meeting, because anybody watching is going to be going, what on earth are you talking about? Because it wasn't on the agenda. And the other part is, if, you know, whatever it is that comes back on the 8th of December, it would really be good if Denise and Calvin had some input as well, because this isn't just about building a building. This is like the whole thing of what happens next. Do they want funding for staffing, funding for marketing, you know, God knows what. Thanks.
Thank you. Bob?
Just one thing, we've got to remember that we have got another hall in the area called Kerwee, and it was said before that no halls make a profit. They've been going for 100 years or so, and it doesn't seem to be a problem to them. So I just dispute that.
Thanks, Bob. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm in the dark and feeling pretty vague about what's happening. I want to see the community in Gohara do well. I think we're tackling it in the wrong way. What I would like to see it is to keep it simple. Yeah, what I would like to see would be to keep it simple and ask Gohara to present us with a comprehensive business case that we can discuss around the council. Because all I've got at the moment, pretty average sort of a report from I'm not saying it just, if any, just, all I've got is a few words from Bob, a couple of words from the mayor, and suddenly we're asking our staff to go in and do a full and comprehensive study on it. That is absolutely back to the front, and I wouldn't be asking our staff to do that. What I would like to see, and I think that we should do, is get Gohara to do a proper comprehensive business case as to what they actually want. Bring that to the council and then we'll formally discuss it. Because then we don't have to waste staff time backwards and forwards, because it's been going backwards and forwards for a long time. We have a very enthusiastic committee, and I suspect that maybe just too enthusiastic. And I would like to see and discuss a proper business case, because I'm not directing our staff to do something that I don't understand from what has been said around this table now. It's just wish-wash.
Good. Thanks, Jeff. We've got the words up on the screen that sit there, which is, I don't know that we want, to me, feasibility study is the wrong words to have there. We want an initial report scoping what's there that may include Jeff as Kelvin. Yeah, so it's too soon to do that level of detail.
But can I just be clear? When there was some suggestion from the group that we should better solve this pretty easily, council. And I said, "There's no way we're doing that." I said, "The earliest you'll get anything firm from us will be March, April next year at the very earliest, because this looks like a consultation issue to me."
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem, and it probably makes sense to push something to the 8th of December meeting more to formalise, and even if it's just putting this information into a report to create a formal process, it's sensible. But there's a lot more water to go under this bridge before this thing gets any closer. If I just a wee bit of latitude, your worship, what probably just disappointed me was that we actually hadn't thought of this option during the last umpteen years, because then we would have dealt with it, because really it's just something going, okay, there are other things that there's plenty of things we need to consider as part of this process. So I just want to lay any thoughts that we're trying to put a feasibility study together to have something council signs off. That's a lot of water. And I don't think this group's really understands or have thought too much about the issues that you've identified with operating costs of these things in 10 years' time and the future. There's a hell of a lot of work to do here. I would word, yeah, I agree, but I would word, my wording back to you on the 8th of December would be more to work with them on their letter of the 23rd of November. There's a lot of work to do here. And it should be driven by Gohara. But there's things we need to tidy up at our end.
And we were clear at the meeting that this would be an annual plan process. This isn't like a quick turnaround for us, because there's community funding involved. It can't happen overnight. So Douglas will bring a formal report to the next meeting, outlining, and including in that, you'll outline some of the next steps, Douglas, that we can either approve or otherwise.
Thank you.
Jenny?
I've just got one last question. If they're wanting to take the hall over themselves, that will mean that Denise and her team would have nothing to do with it because they will own it or will not be owned by the council. So they would have to do their own bookings and everything, just like Kirwi does.
It'll be a private facility run
Yes.
for the community
Yep. So therefore,
on council reserve.
do we need to spend a lot of council time looking from Denise's department, looking into what they can put into? We won't need it because they will be doing it all themselves.
I think we've given enough time to this topic. There's a next step that's going to be taken and it needs to be formalised at the next meeting. Douglas, thank you for reporting back on that. Anything else in your report that you want to highlight? Mover and seconder for A and B that are up there. Alexander, seconder. Epeha, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is resolution to exclude the public. Moves Reid, seconded Mugford. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. And let's adjourn the meeting till 3 o'clock. Take 15 minutes and we'll come back for our PX. Thank you.